My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 30 years old, and last year I went from happily married and pregnant to single with a restraining order in the space of one conversation. If you'd walked into my life a year ago, you'd think I had it all figured out. I own a landscaping company in Florida that I built from a used pickup and a push mower, 3 crews, steady commercial contracts, HOA boards that actually return my calls. Numbers don't scare me. Contracts don't scare me. What scares me is people deciding I'm not enough and walking away without warning. Maybe that's why I didn't see it coming, or maybe I didn't want to. My husband, Mason, is also 30. Technically, was my husband, but we'll get there. He teaches 3rd grade. On paper, he's the sweet, patient elementary teacher everyone trusts with their kids. On weekends, though, he was my licensed drone pilot. He passed the FA Part 107 exam just because he thought it looked fun. He flies a DJI Air 3 like it's an extension of his hand. He'd knock out grid missions over properties, land the drone, hand me a tablet, and boom, perfect orthomosaics with ridiculous resolution. I'd have square footage, slope, tree counts before I even got my boots dirty. He saved me from underbidding a 6-acre HOA by almost 12 grand once. That one job alone paid for the drone. We met in college. Mason did elementary ed. I did horticulture. We dated, graduated, got married, scraped and saved for a house. We'd talk about having a big family someday, and then one day, someday, turned into 2 pink lines on a stick. He cried when I told him, the good kind of crying. For a while, life was solid. We had our routines. He'd come home smelling like dry erase markers and glue sticks. I'd come home smelling like mulch and gasoline, and we'd meet in the middle on the couch. We fought about stupid things, whose turn it was to cook, who left their socks by the couch, but nothing big, nothing fatal. And then Brandon moved back. Brandon is Mason's best friend from college. You know the type. The guy who thinks marriage is a life sentence, thinks settling down is the same as giving up. Still telling stories that peaked at 23. He'd moved 12 hours away to Denver right after our wedding. Every time we saw him, I got this static off him. Not attraction, resentment. Like he believed I'd stolen his favorite toy. He'd make these little jabs whenever we visited. Man, Nat's got you on a leash now, huh? Remember when we could just take off for a weekend without checking with anyone? Marriage kills freedom, dude, I'm just saying. But he lived far away, so his opinions were just annoying background noise. Until he got laid off and moved back to town, 15 minutes from our house. Suddenly, Brandon was in my living room 3-4 nights a week. No warning. I'd get home from a 10-hour day in the sun and find him sprawled on our couch with his shoes on my coffee table, eating our food like he paid half the mortgage. Mason started shifting. It was little things at first. He wanted to see my phone more, asked who I was texting when I replied to a crew lead. Side-eyed me when I Venmo'd my buddy $10 for lunch. You're really close with your foreman, huh? He'd say in that joking, not joking tone. One night I came home and caught the end of a conversation between him and Brandon. They went silent the second I walked in. Brandon gave me that fake smile people use when they've been talking trash about you. What were you guys talking about? I asked, heading for the fridge. Nothing, Mason said too quickly. Just guy stuff, Brandon added, smirking. In the kitchen, Mason followed me, voice annoyingly casual. Why are you being weird? He asked. I'm not, I said, grabbing a bottle of water, just wondering why my husband suddenly goes silent when I walk into my own house. You're being paranoid. That word stuck like a splinter. 2 weeks later, it escalated. We were in the living room. Brandon had just left. Mason sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, like he'd practiced whatever he was about to say. I need your passcode, he said. You already went through my phone this week, I reminded him. Twice. Yeah, but if I had the passcode, I could check whenever I wanted. That's how trust works. I laughed. I couldn't help it. No, that's how surveillance works, Mason. If you have nothing to hide, why won't you give it to me? I already showed you my messages, my call log, my email. What else do you want, a body cam? He narrowed his eyes. This is exactly what cheaters do. They get defensive. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my ears. This wasn't my husband. This was my husband with Brandon's voice leaking through. I'm not cheating, I said. I'm defending basic privacy. Right on cue, Mason's phone lit up. Brandon. He answered on speaker. So, Brandon said, skipping a greeting. Did she give you the passcode yet? No, Mason said. There was a pause, then a smug little, classic cheater move. Trust me, I've seen this before. I walked out of the room before I said something I couldn't take back. Spent the rest of the night in my garage shop cleaning equipment that didn't need cleaning, hands shaking over impact wrenches and trimmers. It didn't get better. It got clinical. Mason started tracking when I left and when I got home, commented if one of my crews texted after hours. He'd sniff my clothes like he was going to smell another man. It was like living with a TSA agent who'd been told their spouse was a bomb. The night it all detonated, he sat me down at the dining table with this weird, rehearsed confidence. The same look he used when he explained math to his 8-year-olds. "I've been talking to Brandon," he started. "Of course you have," I muttered. He helped me realize something. Monogamy is kind of outdated. I blinked. "Come again?" "Look, if you're already cheating, which I think you are, then at least an open marriage would make it honest. It's actually really progressive when you think about it." He said it like he was pitching a tech startup, not suggesting we set our marriage on fire. "No," I said. He frowned. "We should at least discuss it." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, feeling my hands go cold. "You just accused your pregnant wife of cheating and offered to blow up our marriage as a solution. We're done." "What do you mean, done?" His voice cracked. "I mean, pack your things and get out of my house." The look on his face was a mix of outrage and shock, like I'd violated some unspoken rule where he got to destroy the relationship and I was supposed to sit there and negotiate my own humiliation. "You can't just kick me out," he stammered. "You're pregnant with my child." "Yeah," I said quietly, "and I'll be a mother to that child. But I'm done being your wife. You let your toxic friend convince you I'm cheating with zero proof. That's not a marriage. That's a hostage situation." "You're overreacting," he snapped. "Couples explore options all the time." "Get out," I said. "I live here," he shot back. "The deed is in my name," I reminded him. "You live here because I allow it. I don't anymore." That landed. His mouth opened and shut a few times. This was not the script he and Brandon had rehearsed. "Where am I supposed to go?" he finally asked. "I don't care," I said. "Your parents, a hotel, Brandon's couch, pick one." "You're being cruel." "I'm being done. There's a difference." He tried the pregnancy card again, rubbing my barely showing stomach like that might soften me. But here's the thing about respect. Once it's gone, it doesn't come back. Mason had spent 2 months proving he had zero respect for me or our marriage. "I'll call my dad," he said. "Great," I replied. "He can help you pack." I texted Rick myself, told him exactly what had happened, that his son had just asked to open our marriage, that I'd told him to leave, that he needed to be picked up immediately. Rick called within 30 seconds. I answered, voice steady. "Get here soon," I said and hung up. For 10 minutes, Mason just stood in the living room, looking lost. The entitled confidence from 10 minutes earlier had evaporated. He'd gambled that I'd feel guilty enough to negotiate. Instead, I'd called his bluff and raised him an eviction. "Is this really happening?" he asked. "Pack or don't pack," I said. "Either way, you're leaving when your dad gets here." 20 minutes later, Rick and his wife Linda came through my front door. Rick looked like he'd aged 5 years on the drive over. Linda looked like she was trying not to cry. "Explain," Rick said. So I did. 2 months of paranoia, Brandon's constant presence, my phone under interrogation. Then tonight, Mason's big progressive pitch for an open marriage. Linda turned to Mason, who'd shuffled out of the bedroom with a half-packed suitcase. "Did you really ask your pregnant wife to open your marriage?" she asked, voice shaking. Mason's shoulders hunched. Brandon said. Rick cut him off. "Brandon's an idiot," he snapped, "and you're a bigger idiot for listening." "I thought it would help my anxiety," Mason muttered. "You don't have anxiety," I said. "You have a toxic friend who hates seeing you happy, and instead of recognizing that, you decided to destroy a 5-year marriage." Linda looked at me with exhausted sadness. "What about counseling?" she asked. "No," I said. "We're done. Tonight he leaves. Tomorrow I'm calling my lawyer." Rick understood. He'd been military. He knew what done sounded like. "Mason," he said quietly, "get your things. You're staying with us." Mason looked at me, maybe expecting one last chance, some hint that I'd take it all back. My face stayed stone. "We'll see what a judge says about kicking out your pregnant husband," he tried as a parting shot. "We'll see what a judge says about you asking for an open marriage," I replied. "Oh, and Mason?" He paused. "We have a prenup. You're not getting my business or my house." His face went white. In all his planning with Brandon, he'd apparently forgotten the paperwork I'd insisted on when we got married. "You planned this," he accused. "No," I said. "I planned for the possibility that marriage doesn't work. Turns out I was smart." Rick guided him toward the door. Linda gave me one last look that was half apology, half plea. I gave her nothing. The door closed. I locked it, changed the code on the garage, turned off all the lights except one in the kitchen, and sat on the couch in the dim glow, hand on my stomach. In one conversation, I'd gone from wife to single pregnant woman. I felt lighter, not happy, not yet, but like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been pretending wasn't there. I grabbed my phone, opened my lawyer's contact, and left a detailed voicemail. Prenup in place. Husband demanded open marriage. I refused and ended it. I want divorce papers as soon as possible. Then, for the first time in 2 months, I slept through the night without anyone accusing me of cheating. This was just the beginning. Monday morning, I was at my lawyer's office before 9, sitting in one of those chairs that are just uncomfortable enough to remind you you're not there for fun. He listened without interrupting, pen moving steadily as I laid everything out. The paranoia, the constant phone checks, the open marriage proposal, Brandon's running commentary in the background. When I mentioned the prenup, he actually smiled. "Smart move," he said. "Make sure you say that again in court if we need it." Then he asked the question that made everything feel real. "What do you want?" "Divorce," I said. 50-50 custody once the baby's here. Child support by the book. He doesn't touch my business or my house. He nodded. "We can work with that. Do you have documentation of his behavior?" I laughed, short and humorless. "I own a business. I keep receipts on everybody." I pulled out a thick folder from my bag and dropped it on his desk. Text screenshots of Mason's accusations, his conversations with Brandon, timestamps from nights they'd tag-teamed my sanity, even Venmo history showing Brandon practically living on our dime for the last 2 months. My lawyer flipped through it, eyebrows climbing. "This is good," he said. "Not for him, for us." By the time I left, I'd signed the initial paperwork. The marriage wasn't legally over yet, but in my mind, the door had already closed. Next step was money. Divorce has a way of turning feelings into math. I went straight to the bank, sat across from a patient woman in a navy blazer, and told her I needed to separate every joint account I had with my husband. We pulled up the transactions together. That's when she frowned and leaned closer to the screen. "Did you authorize all of these?" she asked, pointing at a pattern. "Little amounts. 50 here, 100 there. Transfers from our joint checking to an account I didn't recognize. Over 2 months, it added up to almost $2,000. "Whose account is that?" I asked. She clicked, scrolled, then turned the screen slightly. "It's a savings account in his name only," she said. "Opened 3 months ago." Of course. Brandon's escape fund had a routing number. "Yeah," I said, anger washing over the initial sting. "We need to flag those. Dispute whatever we can." She nodded, fingers already moving. "Given the circumstances," she said carefully, "the bank can freeze the account while we review." "Do it," I said. If he and Brandon had been building a little breakup war chest behind my back, they could explain it to a fraud investigator. By noon, I'd removed his name from every bill I could legally remove him from and changed the passwords on everything else: utilities, streaming, cloud storage. I called my business accountant and made sure Mason's name wasn't on anything but tax forms. "He's listed as a spouse for filing," my accountant said, "but he's never made a business decision, signed a contract, or attended a single meeting. I can write an affidavit to that effect." "Please do," I said. By mid-afternoon, my phone started lighting up. Not from Mason, from everybody else. First was Linda, my mother-in-law, apologizing and asking me not to give up on him. Then his sister just checking in to make sure I knew how emotional pregnancies could make a man. Translation: please pretend he didn't just ask to sleep with other women. I answered none of them. Then Brandon started. Long, self-righteous paragraphs on Facebook about abusive wives kicking out their husbands for wanting honest communication. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. Mutual friends started liking and commenting, weighing in on a situation they knew nothing about. I screenshotted every post, every comment, and forwarded them to my lawyer with a simple note. "Defamation?" He replied, "Document everything. Don't respond. This will help us." 3 days later, the school principal called me. I was in my truck, idling between job sites, when an unknown number popped up. "Ms. Pierce?" a man's voice said. "This is Mr. Sanders, principal at Birchwood Elementary. I wanted to verify something." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Okay. Your husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, filed a concern saying you'd been harassing him here at work," he said. "Showing up, calling the school, things like that. I reviewed our records. There's no sign of that. Have you been contacting him here?" "No," I said, pulse spiking with a different kind of anger now. "I haven't been anywhere near that school. I'm the one who kicked him out." That's what I thought, Sanders said. Given that, I'll be closing the matter. I wanted to let you know directly. Thank you, I said. When we hung up, I sat there in the idling truck, staring at the dashboard. He wasn't just playing victim online, he was trying to put it in official files. That was the moment I decided my house wasn't just my home anymore. It was evidence. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Mason. I need to pick up my things. Friday at 2. I'll have someone with me. Someone was obviously Brandon. I replied, 2 is fine. You have 30 minutes. Then I spent Friday morning moving every box of his stuff from the garage to the front porch. Clothes, shoes, junk he should have thrown away years ago. Anything sentimental or shared, I'd already separated out and put aside. He could ask his lawyer about those. Before they arrived, I installed security cameras. One over the front door, one watching the driveway, one in the living room facing the hallway, and my office door, all hooked up to cloud storage. My lawyer's voice was in my ear. Documentation is your friend. At 2:10, they pulled up. Mason climbed out of the driver's seat in a faded school polo like he was trying to signal, good guy. Brandon stepped out on the passenger side in aviators and a smug expression that made my teeth itch. I opened the front door before they could knock. Your boxes are on the porch, I said. Mason looked past me into the house like he was entitled to the view. I need to come inside, he said. I left stuff in the bedroom. Everything's in the boxes, I said. You probably missed things, he argued. I want to check. No, I said. You don't live here anymore. You can't keep me out of my own house, he snapped. It's not your house, I reminded him. If you think I'm withholding property, your lawyer can file a request. For now, you take what's on the porch. Brandon stepped closer like he was auditioning for the role of backup intimidator. Are you really going to be difficult about this? He asked, voice dripping with condescension. I looked him right in the eye. I want you to take the boxes and leave my property. Mason changed tactics, his voice softening in that fake way he used with parents on conference night. Natalie, please, I just need 5 minutes. I won't touch anything that's not mine. Brandon can wait outside. 5 minutes. The cameras were rolling. The front door was in my line of sight. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. Brandon stays outside. I follow you the whole time. Mason nodded like we'd just negotiated a peace treaty. Brandon rolled his eyes but stayed put on the porch, tapping on his phone. Mason walked in. I stayed 3 feet behind him, phone in my hand, timer counting down. He checked the bedroom closet. Empty. The bathroom cabinets. Empty. The dresser. Empty. I'd been thorough. Halfway down the hall, he stopped. I forgot the guest room closet, he said, turning. I followed. We were maybe 6 steps from the living room when I heard the front door open. Different footsteps. Heavier. I turned fast. Brandon was in my living room, walking straight toward my office door. Get out, now, I said, voice sharp enough to cut. He froze mid-step. I specifically told you to stay outside. I stepped between him and the office. Turn around and leave. His jaw tightened, but he backed up, hands raised in mock surrender. Relax, he muttered. Nobody's stealing your precious plants. Mason hurried out of the hallway, blinking like he hadn't expected Brandon to push that boundary so fast. I told you to wait outside, he hissed at him. Yeah, whatever, Brandon muttered, already heading toward the porch. They loaded the boxes into the car in tense silence. No more pleading, no more soft voices. Just 2 men who'd realized the free-for-all days were over. When they drove off, gravel crunching under their tires, I shut the door, locked it, and went straight to my laptop. The cameras had been live the whole time. I pulled up the footage and rewound to the exact moment I'd turned my back. The living room camera caught it in full, ugly clarity. Brandon stepped over the threshold, glanced toward the hallway to make sure I was out of sight, then went straight for my office. He knelt, reached under my desk, and pulled out my PS5, the one I barely used anymore, but still not exactly sentimental. He tucked it under his jacket, started for the door, then froze as my voice rang out. He panicked, dropped it, and with a quick little kick, shoved it back under the desk like a guilty teenager. I watched the clip twice, then a third time. The part that bothered me most wasn't even the attempted theft. It was the fact that in their heads, they still believed they were owed pieces of my life, my stuff, my peace, my future. I downloaded the footage, sent it to my lawyer with a short message. They tried to steal from me today. What can we do? His reply came 5 minutes later. We file for a restraining order, he wrote, and we attach this. They just made our custody argument a lot easier. I stared at the paused frame of Brandon in my office, halfway bent over, eyes on my property. I thought that was the worst it would get. I had no idea that very soon my front yard would be covered in shredded rubber and blue flashing lights. The restraining order went through faster than I expected. My lawyer filed the motion Monday morning, attached the footage of Brandon trying to steal from my office, and by Wednesday afternoon, a judge had already signed it. Mason and Brandon were both prohibited from coming within 100 yards of me, my home, or my business property. When the order was delivered to Mason's parents' house, Linda called me in tears. "I don't understand why you do this," she sobbed. I didn't answer, because she did understand. She just didn't want to admit it. By week 3 of the separation, the legal machine was in full swing. Mediation day. It was Thursday at 2, scorching Florida heat making the parking lot shimmer. I walked into the mediator's office wearing work pants, boots still dusty from the job site. I wanted to look like exactly who I was, someone who built her life with her own hands. Mason arrived 5 minutes late wearing a maternity-maximizing sympathy outfit. Not for himself, he wasn't the one pregnant, but he'd coached himself into the poor, stressed father role. His entire posture said, "Please feel sorry for me." His lawyer was a thin man with glasses and an aggressive briefcase. He gave me a polite nod that didn't reach his eyes. My lawyer leaned toward me as we sat. "They're going to try something dramatic. Don't react." Sure enough, once we were seated, Mason's lawyer launched into their demands like he was reading a menu. Primary custody for my client. Minimal visitation for Ms. Pierce, child support based on her business gross income, and spousal support for 2 years due to emotional distress. I actually laughed, out loud, couldn't help it. My lawyer didn't even blink. He slid our counteroffer forward like he was placing a chess piece. 50-50 custody, child support at state guidelines, no spousal support, prenup fully enforced. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with a calm, worn expression, looked between us. "Mr. Pierce," she said gently, "why do you believe you should have primary custody?" Mason leaned in, voice soft, wounded. "She kicked me out while she was pregnant. It proves she doesn't care about the baby's stability." I kept my face still. "Actually," I said when given the chance, "I kicked you out because you accused me of cheating, demanded an open marriage, and let your friend coach you into dismantling our marriage." "That's not true," Mason snapped. "She's controlling. She filed a restraining order over nothing." My lawyer reached into his portfolio, pulled out a tablet, and tapped the screen. "Let's go ahead and play the footage," he said calmly. The room fell silent as Brandon's attempted theft played on loop. Brandon slipping into my house. Brandon bending under my desk. Brandon stuffing my PS5 into his jacket. Brandon kicking it back under the desk when I called out. The mediator set her pen down. "Mason," she said slowly, "did you instruct your friend to retrieve any belongings from Ms. Pierce's home?" Mason swallowed hard. His eyes darted to his lawyer. I didn't tell him to take anything," he stammered. "So you acknowledge he tried to?" she asked. "I didn't know he was going to do that." Her expression didn't change. "Whether you knew or not, this is highly concerning." The next 10 minutes felt like someone emptying a balloon. Their entire custody argument, their moral high ground, their fake victim narrative, slowly deflating until there was nothing left but silence. The mediator stepped out, then returned with her recommendation. 50-50 custody beginning when the child turns 1, she said. Primary with the mother until then, with generous visitation for the father. Child support at state guidelines. No spousal support. Prenup enforced. I strongly advise both parties to sign today. Mason's lawyer whispered urgently to him. Mason looked at me like he wanted to hate me, but didn't have the energy. Finally, he muttered, "We accept." Just like that, it was over. Legally, anyway. I walked out of the building feeling lighter, like the ground had shifted beneath my feet, but somehow in my favor. Unfortunately, the universe wasn't done testing that balance. The felony night. 2 nights after mediation, I was in bed, drifting off to sleep, when my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor, Mr. Hanley, retired cop, the kind who notices everything. "Natalie, you home? Something's going on with your truck." My heart hit my throat. I ran outside barefoot. My work truck, the one with commercial-grade mud tires and a steel toolbox, sat crooked in the driveway, all 4 tires sliced open, rubber shredded like confetti. And standing under the streetlight at the end of the block? Mason's car, pulling away. Slow. Too slow. The next 10 minutes were a blur. Hanley came out with his phone already in his hand. "They slashed your tires," he said. "I got it on my driveway camera. And, this is the good part, they slashed one of their own tires while doing it." "What?" He nodded grimly. "Knife must have slipped. They drove off on the rim. Sparks and everything." 5 minutes later, blue and red lights reflected off my house. 15 minutes later, 2 officers returned from 2 blocks away, with Mason and Brandon in handcuffs, standing beside their car with a shredded tire and a knife on the floorboard. Real knife, real weapon, real stupidity. When an officer approached me, I folded my arms. "They're violating a restraining order," I said. "We confirm that," he replied. "And because these tires," he bent to inspect my truck, "are commercial grade and valued over $800 per tire, this qualifies as felony criminal mischief." My stomach dropped, not in fear, in disbelief. Mason looked at me from the back seat of the squad car, eyes wild, somewhere between desperate and furious. Brandon's expression? Pure contempt. Like this still wasn't his fault. I didn't say a word as the cruiser pulled away. The aftermath. Monday morning, my lawyer called, practically vibrating with energy. "This changes everything," he said. "Restraining order violation, felony destruction of property, criminal intent. We can petition the judge to modify custody. This gives us tremendous leverage." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the baby's ultrasound photo on the fridge. "Do whatever you need to do," I said. 2 weeks later, Mason and Brandon took a plea deal. Misdemeanor downgrade, probation, 200 hours community service, full restitution for my tires. Mason's teaching job survived. Barely. The school district didn't fire him, but he was put on a professional conduct watch list. One more incident and he'd be out. Brandon lost his retail job immediately. And suddenly, every mutual friend had a version of the story that involved me being dramatic or overreacting. But I didn't care. I had bigger things to worry about. The day everything broke. Months passed. The pregnancies moved along. I kept my distance. Mason obeyed the restraining order, though he sulked about it through family. Then, one Thursday afternoon in late spring, my lawyer called. His voice was different, too soft, too careful. "Natalie, you need to sit down." My skin went cold. What happened? He swallowed audibly. Mason's parents took him to the hospital earlier today. At his routine prenatal appointment, he paused. There was no heartbeat. My vision tunneled. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "He was 27 weeks. That's—" "I know," he said. They admitted Mason immediately. The pregnancy was lost. I sank to the floor. My son, my baby boy, gone in a sentence. I didn't go inside the hospital. I sat in the parking lot instead, engine off, hands trembling around the steering wheel, tears cutting silent tracks down my cheeks. An hour passed before my phone rang again. "Rick." His voice cracked the moment I answered. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. You were going to be a wonderful mother." "What happened?" I whispered. "They're still running tests," he said, "but the doctor mentioned trauma, physical strain, lifestyle choices. Mason hasn't been following recommendations." A long pause. "He had substances in his system," he finally said. I closed my eyes, because I had known. Months ago, I'd told Mason, "You're going to ruin this child's life." Never, not once, did I imagine he'd ruin it before our son ever took a breath. The nursery night. I went home and opened the door to the spare room I'd been quietly assembling piece by piece. The crib I'd built myself, the bookshelf with 3 rows of board books waiting for tiny fingers, the soft gray elephant blanket draped over the rocking chair, a little wooden name sign I hadn't even picked a name for. I worked silently, unscrewed the crib rails, folded the blankets, packed everything into boxes. Then I loaded my truck and drove it all to a women's shelter donation center. By the time I finished, it was past 3 in the morning. My hands were raw, the room was empty, and it felt like our baby had never existed. And that, not the divorce, not the betrayal, was what truly broke something inside me. Grief isn't loud, not the real kind. It doesn't scream. It doesn't collapse on the floor in dramatic sobs. Real grief is quiet. It sits with you at breakfast. It follows you into your truck. It waits beside you at red lights. And some days it whispers, "You should have seen this coming." I didn't respond to that voice. I worked instead. The rebuild. After the loss, I buried myself in my business. I added a 4th crew, then a 5th. I took on commercial accounts that used to intimidate me, apartment complexes, office parks, places with contracts thick enough to be used as doorstops. Long days blurred into long nights. My body was exhausted, and my mind stayed too busy to wander back to that quiet hospital parking lot where I'd learned my son was gone. People would ask how I was doing. I'd tell them, "I'm fine," in the same tone I used to tell clients their sprinklers were outdated. Fine, functional, operating at 65% and pretending it was 90%, The parking lot encounter. It had been almost 6 months since the loss when I saw him again. I was loading mulch into my truck at Home Depot, sweat sticking to the back of my t-shirt, when someone called, "Natalie?" I turned. Mason stood 10 feet away in khakis and a blue Publix polo. The logo was faded, the collar was wrinkled. This was a man who used to show up to school in crisp button-downs and polished shoes. Not anymore. Our eyes met. For the first time in this entire disaster, he looked small. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. I shut my tailgate. 3 minutes. Parking lot rules. He exhaled shakily, stepped closer, and then, shockingly, he did something I'd never expected him capable of. He told the truth. "I ruined everything," he said, voice cracking. "You were right about Brandon being toxic. I let him get into my head. I let him make me paranoid. I lost the marriage. I lost the baby. I lost everything." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to. He continued. "I thought you'd always be there. I thought no matter how I acted, you'd forgive me." His voice shook harder. "I was entitled and selfish and stupid, and I am so sorry." I studied him. This wasn't the man who stood in the mediator's office pretending to be a victim. This wasn't the man who slashed my truck tires. This wasn't the man who screamed that I didn't care about the baby. This was someone hollowed out, finally aware of the crater he'd dug with his own hands. I finally spoke. "I accept your apology," I said softly, "but it doesn't change anything." He blinked rapidly, like he'd prepared for everything except honesty. "You need therapy, Mason," I added. "Real therapy. Not Brandon, not drinking, not blaming other people. You need to fix whatever part of you thought open marriage was easier than talking to your wife." He nodded, looking down. "I know." "Good," I said. "Do the work, but do it away from me." He swallowed. Are you happy?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I will be." He nodded slowly. "You deserve to be." We stood there for a moment. Two people tied together by a child who never got to be born. Two people who'd destroyed something that should have been beautiful. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry about the baby, every single day." "That doesn't fix it," I said, "but it's something." He turned to walk away, then stopped. "Is there anything I can do to make it right?" "No," I said gently, "nothing at all." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it without anger. He walked to his car. I watched him go, and I felt nothing. Not hate, not rage, not even sadness. Just release. He was no longer the person who could hurt me. He was just a chapter I'd survived. Eli. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met Eli. He was a property manager at one of the buildings my crews serviced. He asked intelligent questions about my maintenance schedule, about whether mulch was better for soil retention than river rock. He didn't flirt with me. He didn't overstep. He was simply respectful. One afternoon, as I was going over a work order, he said, "By the way, would you like to get dinner sometime?" Just like that. No games. No testing me. No dramatic pauses. I stared at him. "Yes," I finally said. "I would." Dinner turned into more dinners. More dinners turned into breakfast. Breakfast turned into weekends together. Then, eventually, he moved in. There were no accusations, no phone checks, no Brandon. He held my hand without gripping. He loved me without doubting me. He made the world feel quiet. A year later, he proposed on a pier at sunset. I said yes, not because I needed marriage to feel whole, but because his presence made wholeness feel easy. Rick's call. 2 years after everything, Rick reached out. We met at a diner. He looked older, weathered. "I want you to know," he said, "Mason is in a bad spot." I nodded. I figured. "He lost his teaching job," Rick continued. "The board finally reviewed the criminal conviction. He's drowning in debt, payday loans, maxed cards. He asked me to talk to you." I didn't react. "He needs help," Rick said quietly. "He can't get a loan. They're about to evict him. He said you're the only one he has left." "The answer is no," I said gently. Rick nodded. He didn't argue. I appreciated that more than he knew. "You did everything you could," I told him. "But he made his choices." Rick sighed. "I know." The desperate call. A week later, my phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered. "Mason." "Natalie, please, Rick talk to you?" "He did." "I lost everything. I don't know what to do. I'll pay you back, with interest, anything." "No," I said simply. He broke, crying, begging. And I listened, quietly, until he finally asked, "Are you really going to let me end up on the street?" That was when my voice sharpened. "I'm not letting you do anything, Mason. You chose this, every step." He tried to interrupt, but I continued. "You chose Brandon. You chose paranoia. You chose to demand an open marriage. You chose to siphon money behind my back. You chose to let your friends steal from my home. You chose to slash my tires. You chose substances while I was carrying our son. Silence. You destroyed our marriage, I said. You contributed to the loss of our child. And now you want me to save you? He whispered, I'm sorry. No, I said. You're desperate. That's not the same thing. He hung up, and that was the last time we ever spoke. What came after? I heard through the grapevine that he moved to North Carolina, sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, working a low-wage job, surviving, not thriving. Meanwhile, I married Eli. Small ceremony, sunset photos. Rick sent a card. Linda didn't come, but she didn't object either. My business hit 7 figures last quarter, 8 crews, 2 more trucks, 3 acres of property bought in cash for storage and offices. And then, last month, I found out I was pregnant again. A girl. This time I cried for a different reason. A better one. Eli held me, forehead pressed to mine, whispering, We're going to do this right. We already were. The nursery is going up next month. And yes, I'm building the crib myself again. Different design, stronger wood, better everything. Because this time nothing in my world feels fragile. Final reflection. Mason was my past. Eli is my present. My daughter is my future. Some people learn from their mistakes. Some don't. I did. And that's why I'm still standing. 2 years after the divorce, my life didn't just settle. It grew into something steady, warm, and quiet in ways I hadn't thought possible. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from absence, but from finally feeling safe. I had a real office now, not the garage, not a corner of my kitchen table, a proper front desk, coffee pot, humming printer kind of office. My crews were out on their routes, invoices were stacked neatly beside my keyboard, and Eli was texting pictures of paint samples for the nursery, asking if sunrise gold was too bright. I was smiling at my phone when another notification popped up. A long message from an unfamiliar account. The first line told me exactly who it was. Brandon. He'd written paragraphs, his specialty, about how he'd been going through a difficult time, how personal issues clouded his judgment, how he never meant to hurt anyone, especially me. He ended it with a hopeful little line about forgiveness and wishing me happiness. I stared at the message for a few seconds. Then I deleted it. No anger, no satisfaction, no emotional electricity, just a quiet, simple erase. Some people don't need a place in your life or your memory. They already took too much. Back in my own world, everything continued moving upward. My business had grown into something I didn't even recognize from the one-truck beginnings. 8 full crews, a scheduling team, 2 office managers, and a 3-acre yard filled with equipment I used to only dream about. It wasn't luck. It was sweat and grit and choosing myself when someone else tried to take me apart. I didn't think about Mason much anymore. I didn't check his social media or ask mutual friends how he was doing. But occasionally, news drifted toward me without permission. A neighbor mentioned he'd moved again. Someone else said he was in North Carolina now, sharing an apartment, working night shifts, looking rough. The truth is, I felt nothing. No triumph. No soft sadness. No lingering ache. Just nothing. A blank page where the hurt used to be. When I was 7 months pregnant with my daughter, I had a routine appointment. Healthy heartbeat, healthy growth, healthy everything. The doctor smiled and handed me the ultrasound printout, a little fist curled near her face like she was ready for the world. Sitting in my truck afterward, hand on my belly, she kicked hard enough to jolt me. I laughed for the first time that whole week. In that parking lot, with the sun warming the dashboard and a tiny life fluttering under my ribs, everything condensed into a single, clear truth. Not every ending needs an apology. Not every story requires closure. Not every person who hurt you is owed a front row seat to your healing. Some people heal by forgetting. Some heal by remembering. I healed by choosing differently. The nursery came together piece by piece. Lavender walls, a white crib with maple rails, sturdier and more beautiful than the one I built before. A rocking chair by the window. Eli's beloved Cloud Mobile hanging above it. He insisted on that one. Said it made the room feel soft. He wasn't wrong. One night after we finished assembling the last dresser, he wrapped his arms around me and rested his hands on my stomach. "You ready?" he whispered. "More than ready," I said. "She's going to love this room," he murmured. "She's going to love her dad," I replied. "And her mom," he whispered. Something inside me shifted quietly, like a door that had been stuck for years, finally easing open. I realized standing there, in paint-stained pajamas and mismatched socks, that I wasn't living in reaction to my past anymore. I wasn't bracing for impact or waiting for chaos. I was building something new, something whole, something mine. Mason will always be a chapter in my story, but he stopped being the author a long time ago. Brandon is nothing more than a reminder of who I'll never become. And my son, he's a loss I'll carry always, but no longer a wound that bleeds. My daughter is my future, Eli is my peace, and I am someone who chose better. Life isn't karma tallying debts. It's choices. And we both ended up exactly where our choices